Let's get one thing straight right away, because this is where most people get misled. It's not the popcorn. If it were the popcorn itself, we'd all just eat a bowl tonight and wake up cognitively sharp, strong, and resilient for the next 70 years. That's not how biology works. What actually keeps many 90-year-olds mentally sharp and physically capable isn't a single food. It's the structure around that food, the habit, the repetition, the predictability their nervous system has learned to trust over decades. When you look at people who age well, really well, you see something almost boring about their lives. They don't constantly chase optimization. They don't overhaul their diet every 6 months. They don't live in extremes. Instead, they anchor their day around small, repeatable behaviors that create stability in the brain and body. Popcorn, in this case, is just a stand in for that kind of habit. Something simple, something accessible. Something they return to again and again without friction. From a neural perspective, habits reduce cognitive load. Every decision you don't have to make frees up resources in the prefrontal cortex. Over decades, that matters. When a person eats roughly the same simple snack at the same time of day, their brain doesn't treat it as a stressor. Blood sugar responses become more predictable. Dopamine spikes are moderate, not chaotic. The nervous system stays regulated. That's not glamorous, but it's powerful. There's also something important about low-barrier habits. Popcorn doesn't require motivation. You don't need to be inspired. You don't need a supplement stack or a perfect environment. You can make it even when you're tired, busy, or not feeling great, and that's the point. The habits that last a lifetime aren't the ones that sound impressive. They're the ones that survive bad days. The 90-year-old who's still sharp didn't rely on willpower. They relied on systems that worked even when willpower failed. Another overlooked factor is consistency over intensity. The brain adapts to patterns, not bursts. Eating one perfect meal doesn't change your biology. Eating something modest, familiar, and nutritionally reasonable thousands of times does. Over decades, those small inputs shape insulin sensitivity, gut health, inflammation levels, and even how resilient the brain becomes to stress and aging. It's not dramatic in the short term, which is why people ignore it. In nutritionally, but compounded over 50, 60, 70 years, it's enormous. There's also a psychological safety component here. Familiar habits create a sense of control and predictability that matters more as people age. Chronic stress accelerates cognitive decline. Simple rituals, like a known snack at a known time prepared in a known way, act as anchors. They tell the nervous system, you're safe, things are stable. That lowers baseline cortisol. And lower cortisol, sustained over decades, is one of the most underrated longevity tools we have. And here's where people really get it wrong. They assume longevity comes from adding more supplements, more protocols, more hacks. But many long-lived, sharp individuals actually succeed by removing complexity. They eat foods they trust. They keep routines they don't have to think about. They avoid decision fatigue. Their days are cognitively lighter, even if their lives weren't easy. Popcorn fits into this because it's not emotionally loaded. It's not tied to guilt or reward cycles the way ultra-processed snacks are. That matters. Foods that create emotional volatility around eating, binging, restriction, shame, keep the brain in a loop of stress and dopamine dysregulation. Simple, neutral foods break that loop. Over time, that supports healthier reward circuitry, which is closely tied to motivation, learning, and mental sharpness later in life. And finally, habits like this reinforce identity. Someone who has a simple daily routine doesn't think of themselves as someone who is trying to be healthy. They just are someone who eats simply, regularly, without drama. Identity-driven behavior is incredibly stable. Once it's set, it runs quietly in the background for decades. So when you hear about popcorn keeping 90-year-olds sharp and strong, don't hear magic. Hear discipline without force. Hear simplicity that scales across a lifetime. Hear a system that doesn't collapse under stress. Because the real secret isn't what's in the bowl. It's the habit that kept showing up long after motivation stopped.